Hello, my name is Brian Levenson, and I'm a product marketing manager at Microsoft, specializing in Microsoft 365. And I'm really excited to be here to share Microsoft's vision for a modern workplace, how we see collaboration and teamwork and mobility and productivity with security built throughout to enable organizations and individuals to be productive and unlock their creativity. Let's go. Good morning. It's a real pleasure to be here, and thanks, David, for kicking us off. My name is Brian Levenson. I'm a product marketing manager on the Microsoft 365 team based in Redmond, so it's always a lot of fun to come out here to DC, see friends, colleagues. I'm a little bit sensitive to having marketing in my title, just based on stereotypes and my own sensitivity. So just by way of introduction, I started in the tech industry, really I like to say when I was about 4. I grew up in Silicon Valley. My dad was a software engineer and I was his beta tester. I'd play games for the Learning Company, Reader Rabbit, My Big Backyard, all of these fun games. I was the very first beta tester. And I grew up in Silicon Valley. I went off to school and was determined not to be my father. I'm not going to be dad. I'm not going to be dad. I studied economics. And fast forward a few years and I am a lot like my dad, and it's pretty great. But I spent some time managing the help desk at my university. I was the Apple campus representative. They gave me an iPod and said, here, go use this, show it off. And that was one of the easiest jobs I've ever had. And then I joined Microsoft. I was a technical account manager for about 6 years. My very first customer had this BPOS thing. It was the late 2000s, and people were saying, cloud, what? And big piece of software and live meeting, okay, what is all of this stuff? And over time, we evolved into Office 365. I decided I wanted to help make the products better. I wanted to design them in a way that makes them more usable, more powerful, and articulate it in terms of what is possible. And so that's where we get into what I like to set the context of any talk that I do around why does Microsoft exist? And fundamentally, well, I guess initially, it was to digitize the physical world, get a desktop or a computer on every desktop, but we've really shifted our mindset. And this makes me so proud because I think it underlines everything we do and is really important context when we think about what are the products, services, technology that we use, that we develop. And ultimately, Microsoft's mission, if you haven't talked to anyone from Microsoft in the last couple of years, we say this all the time, but our mission is to empower every person, every individual, every team, group, organization, agency, company to achieve more. We design the technology, the platforms, the capabilities that unleash our own creativity, that unlock the innovation within an organization. And if you've watched TV since roughly the Super Bowl, you may see the Microsoft ads. We have Common, the hip-hop artist, standing on stage, and he says, we have more power in our fingertips than the generations that came before us. And I really like that construct and that mindset of, we really do. Within our laptops, within our phones, we have access to nearly unlimited information. But what I think is even more important is that we think about the technology as not being necessarily the solution, but the tools. Common elaborates that technology is the paintbrush and you are the painter. It is the microphone and you are the singer. It unleashes our creativity and what we're capable of. And not only do I love that, but it always reminds me back to when I first started at Microsoft. We did new employee orientation. They take us out to Redmond and they wow you with the campus. And one of the favorite things that I did is they take us through the home of the future. And this is a concept space where they have stuff kind of mocked up and there's someone behind the screen talking to you and all of this cool stuff, but it was the home of the future, 2009-ish. They were showing things like you walk up and you hit the doorbell and the guy has a phone, or the fake phone, and it shows who's at the door, and he was able to talk to us, unlock the door for us. We walk in and the phone starts to show directions to find the bathroom. The refrigerator helps us recognize when the milk is low so we can order more. We start talking to the toaster. Hey toaster, how's traffic this morning on the way to work? And it gives you an update on traffic and weather. And as I was on the flight on the way out here, I was thinking about how that's our reality now. Now, I'm not necessarily talking to the toaster. Maybe I'm talking to one of those Echo Dots or Google Homes or Cortana. But that is our reality now. We have a proliferation of devices that are connected to the internet and have access to that nearly unlimited information. So many of us have these, the little step trackers and sleep trackers, smart lights and smart doorbells. I've got a camera set up outside. We had a couple packages stolen. So now I've got a camera that notifies me anytime a car drives past, which I kind of need to fix. That's a little annoying. But conceptually, it's great. And it also tells me when there's someone at the front door. I can talk to them. It's really cool. And that is our reality. That's how we're living. And that's how we're living moving forward. And that requires a powerful platform. With the explosion of IoT devices, we're collecting massive, massive, massive amounts of data. An unprecedented amount of data is collected and stored on a daily basis, down to really the seconds when you think about smart cars. And so we need to be able to make sense of that information. That's where things like artificial intelligence and machine learning start to come in. And that requires this platform that I mentioned. Well, welcome Azure. Azure is that platform for connecting devices, storing data, making sense of this massive amount of information going on around us. And it's designed from the ground up to not only enable the productivity of organizations, of teams, of individuals, but also to be hybrid scenarios, take advantage of the infrastructure that you've invested in, that companies and agencies have invested in, to use that intelligence, the artificial intelligence, the machine learning, to make sure that we have the information we need, maybe even before we know that we need it. And it must be trusted. I always like to explain that security for Microsoft's cloud is an existential consideration for us. If we cannot secure your information, if we cannot protect the privacy of your organization, your data, your users, we will cease to exist. We will go out of business and we will have no right to be in business. But when we say we need a trusted platform, we also like to back that up by saying that we are trusted. This is some of our marketing slides, of course. We get into the fact that 90% of Fortune 500s do use Azure. That's pretty cool. And also recognizing that I'm in Washington, D.C., 100% of the federal agencies use Azure, as do a number of different branches from the military. It's really cool. It's really powerful to see what organizations are doing on top of Azure. And now, when I think of Azure, I usually think cloud. Okay, cloud platform, infrastructure as a service, I can spin up VMs, and that's all true. Azure is a lot of things. Azure, we break it down into the tools, the workloads, the infrastructure, and some of the coolest things that are possible are, for example, we're pivoting the way that we actually even think about managing IT infrastructure to the point of you can spin up just what you're using. You don't have to buy hardware and procure out and prepare capacity for the seasonal spike that you might get. In retail, we always see it around the holiday season. I like to think about the Census Bureau, when every couple of years we do the census and they hire thousands upon thousands more people. But those are just simple examples of the ways that capacity comes and goes, and with the cloud, it spins up, it spins down, it's simple. There's also hundreds of services running in Azure. Everything from the machine learning services, the cognitive services, app services, and logic apps. And one of the really coolest things that I think about this, and when I started in IT working at Microsoft, I would work with organizations and they would say, we really need this new service, this new feature. There's something that is not quite meeting our needs. And we would say, okay, cool. Well, it's 2009. We just locked the build for Server 2010. So we'll evaluate it for Service Pack 1, but realistically, that's probably going into the Server 2013. You're going to wait for Service Pack 1 to be stable enough that you're going to deploy it. That'll take maybe 6 months to go through tests, so we'll have it to you in about 6 years. And that's a little underwhelming when you have a conversation about a need that is now. And so when we think about the cloud, we're actually able to release new services on an ongoing basis. And so that way we keep up with the needs of organizations. We're able to innovate and take advantage of industry trends and build the new capabilities. But in order to take advantage of these new services, we also need the integrated tooling to be successful. We need to be able to enable the agile development models, DevOps. We bring Visual Studio into the cloud. Then you use these services, you develop these powerful applications and services and products, but then you need to be able to manage it. With things like the Azure Security Center, you can look at exactly how people are using the applications. With things like Cloud-In or Cloud-In, you can actually optimize for the cost based on your use and projection. And of course, Azure is also an open platform. One of my favorite parts about this slide is that there are names on here that make Steve Ballmer cringe a little bit, which always makes me laugh. Things like Linux, right? There's some famous quotes by former Microsoft executives about some of these app frameworks. And of course, we love .NET. We always will. But we also support PHP, Java, Node, Ruby on Rails. We want to be where people are working and how they want to work. And this is a really new paradigm for Microsoft, where traditionally we would say, okay, we want to go make sure that we have a good Azure platform and construct for containers. And we would assign some engineers and say, go do containers best, and maybe try to figure out what the competition is doing. The way we approach it now is when we want to do containers, we go out and we found the experts, and we said, we want you to come make our platform the best. And we hire the people that wrote the books. It's pretty cool, and this really is a new Microsoft, but it's also changing the way that we work. Our workplace, with the technology that we have, the devices, the services, storage in the cloud that's basically unlimited, is fundamentally changing the way that we do work. And so Microsoft talks a lot about this modern workplace. What is this modern workplace? What does this mean to us? Ultimately, the modern workplace is our vision for how we do work, how we enable our organizations to be productive, how we enable individuals to collaborate together. We see fundamental shifts in the workplace and in the way that people are doing work. For example, by 2020, we expect that 50% of the workforce will be millennials. That probably makes about 50% of the room groan, and the other 50% say, oh, I'm not a millennial. I can't relate to that. This one strikes a little too close to home because based on my age, technically I am a millennial. So I guess I fall in that second half of it. No, that's not me. But I actually extend this to say that not only are millennials entering the workforce with expectations, but I think we all are. Now, partly because I know that I'm speaking to a room of technologists, we play with devices. We like to break things and fix things. We like to be using this latest technology. And we want to be doing that at work also. Now, if I want to schedule, she hates when I say this. If I want to schedule a work meeting with my wife, effectively a date, or maybe vice versa, I can reach out to her by sending her a message via SMS, Facebook, LinkedIn, Snapchat, WhatsApp. I can FaceTime, Skype. I could make a phone call, although I haven't done that in a while. But there are a million ways that I can collaborate with my wife to schedule that meeting. In that case, it's a date. In the work environment, it would be a meeting. If we want to synchronize our calendars, that's very, very simple. We have a shared calendar. We can send documents back and forth. When we were planning our wedding, we had a shared notebook where we would do a lot of work. And we want to be able to work that way also in the office. And that extends also to the mobility of being able to work wherever we want, whenever we want. With the right security in place, of course. But I've always thought about my phone as being my mobile device. And it is. It's mobile. It goes where I take it. And I've had some debates with friends over whether or not we would rather lose our phone or our wallet. And the verdict is still out on that, or the jury is still out. But at the end of the day, my phone is mobile because it goes where I take it. So is my laptop. But if I leave my phone there, ultimately I am mobile. The user is mobile. Our experience is mobile. Access to our information is what's mobile. And so while it's still absolutely important that we can do work from devices that move with us, Microsoft is pivoting and thinking about mobility as rather, how do we have the same experience across devices? I have my mobile phone. I also have my laptop. And for the last couple of days, my office was the hotel lobby, or my hotel room, or the hallway out here. I've been doing work ever since I left Redmond, and yet I haven't actually been in my office for the last few days. With OneDrive for Business storing all of my documents, with all of my email and exchange online, I have 9 years worth of documents, 9 years worth of email at my fingertips on my laptop and in my phone. I have a little Bluetooth headset, and I've never had an actual phone on my desk since I joined Microsoft. My phone number is through Skype or Teams. When someone calls me, my computer rings, my Bluetooth headset is my phone, and so ultimately my office is wherever I need to do work. Now, there's a couple of things that I like to share that always make people nervous. First of all, 9 years worth of documents in OneDrive. We have retention policies. I use the documents, the ones that I don't use, time out and get deleted. I have 370,000 emails in my inbox. Same thing there, retention policies, litigation hold, e-discovery. I love telling that to CISOs. They always start to squirm a little bit. And I'll show you, I really do have 370,000 emails in my inbox because I have a 100 gigabyte inbox with unlimited archiving. I don't need to delete stuff so that I don't hit my quota, but it means that I really can work wherever I need to, whenever I need to. And that's really important because I'm not often at my desk the time that someone needs that bit of information. I can open up the mobile apps and give people access to my documents out of OneDrive. I can send them the link to that SharePoint site. And it also allows me to be more creative, which we see as being absolutely crucial to innovation, to productivity, also, I would argue, to happiness. Routine tasks are important. We all do them. We all must do them. I don't see that ending anytime soon. But at the end of the day, it's when we can be creative, when we can come up with solutions to problems, that we do our best work. And the mobility, the seamless applications that allow us to do that make it much more efficient. But also, when we have massive amounts of information, we know that we are also then targets for cyber attacks. My favorite part about this statistic is that it means that 20% of organizations are a little bit clueless. The question is not, will we be attacked? Or will we be breached? It's not if. The question is really when. And I would argue that more importantly than when, it's rather, how do we respond? What do we do about it? Microsoft has actually shifted pretty significantly in the way that we think about cyber attacks and security within Microsoft. We used to take an approach of don't let anyone onto the network ever, don't let any data off the network ever. You build a really strong perimeter and say no one shall pass. But we know that, well, I'll say not every user, because there are those perfect users out there, people click the wrong link by accident, or just click every link they ever receive. People compromise their credentials, and they will get past the network perimeter. They will get onto the network. So then the question is, how do we mitigate and limit what they have access to do? How do we spot anomalies in behavior? If Tom is downloading 20 times more documents than he does on average, that should start to trigger some alerts and notifications. If Susan has all of a sudden started elevating her permissions to servers she's never accessed before, similarly, that should start to trigger alerts. Not just assume that Susan will never go to that bad server, because Susan might not be the one doing that. And so it's the security, unlocking the creativity, the ability to be mobile and productive that really brings together what we think about as Microsoft 365. So I want to pause here for a moment because one of my favorite conversations was a couple of weeks ago where I mentioned Microsoft 365 to a friend and he said, "Oh, you mean Office 365? I said, "Well, no, nice, thanks, but I actually do mean Microsoft 365. And it reminded me that our marketing teams come up with lots of great names, but we need to be very clear about what this is. For the last few years, we have been building up Office 365 as a set of productivity and collaboration services. Enterprise mobility and security are the security and mobility services, as the name implies. And Windows is the operating system that makes devices powerful. It runs the applications on top of it. And we bring this together into the modern workplace solution. When you're running Windows, in particular Windows 10, With Office 365 and EMS, you can do things like have a truly mobile office on your laptop with access to 9 years worth of content. Now I want to drill into how we think about Microsoft 365 a little bit more specifically. I mentioned that creativity is important, and it absolutely is. We see creativity as being so crucial to an organization's success, as well as teamwork. You know, we think about collaboration, and that's not just, oh, people always want to work together. But with the internet, with the technology, we see organizations shifting in the way that they work from a need-to-know basis to a need-to-not-know basis. We actually saw this formalized in the, I believe it was the US Army as we were going into Iraq with General McChrystal, where we formally shifted to a need-to-not-know basis. We're able to cross-pollinate across teams. When a business division and a business division or two different teams within an agency are able to collaborate and start to solve problems by working together, it fundamentally changes the paradigm of how we do work, how we collaborate, and how we be productive and creative. And of course, IT budgets tend to not be the first thing to grow. So we want to make sure everything is simple. We're integrating it as much as possible and building the security straight through. And my particular background, I specialize in US government, and so I'm quite proud that earlier this month we introduced Microsoft 365 into the US government environments. And I'll elaborate on that a whole bunch in a few minutes. We have a couple of environments and even a sovereign or separate isolated cloud designed for the US government for specific compliance purposes. And I'll elaborate on what those are, who they're designed for, and how we think about them. But when we think about creativity, I want to make it a little bit more real. It's not just, can the individual be creative, but how can the technology enable that? When I'm able to use my device and it gives me ideas, I can visualize information in powerful new ways, and I'm able to easily connect and share. Teamwork extends just beyond who are the individuals that you work with, but also how can we let everyone work together? This is something that I'm really proud of Microsoft for doing, which is that we are building accessibility features and capabilities into every application that we make. One, that's the right thing to do. It allows everyone on the team to contribute. It allows every customer and citizen to consume the information that we create. And at the federal government level, it's also the law with Section 508 and some of the legislation around American Disabilities Act. We need to make sure that anything created by the government, anything created by companies can truly be used by everyone. Everyone can contribute. And we're building in this group teamwork mentality across all of the applications. It is very easy to share information. It's also very easy to set policies that restrict sharing, and I'll mention that as well with the security. But when we think about groups being built throughout all of the Office applications, the construct that you can put individuals into an identity model where they get shared access to resources or access to shared resources, this is absolutely crucial in everything that we do. One of my favorite new features, though, is the co-authoring within the Office applications. Because I like to think back to the 70s and 80s as Microsoft was growing up, we were digitizing the physical world. A piece of lined paper became Word, spreadsheets Excel, presentations were PowerPoint. But could you imagine mailing a document back and forth, like literally in the mail, and trying to write a paper by 3 people if you were across the world? It would take months, if not years. But when you save a document in OneDrive or on a SharePoint site, you can co-author it in real time from anywhere in the world, and that is really cool. That is a fundamental paradigm shift in the way that we collaborate. It's not just emailing it back and forth where, you know, you write a document, you send it to 5 people, you ask for feedback. We've got 10 versions, 1 through 15 somehow. We're merging them back together. It's a huge pain, but when you can co-author and save it on a site and everyone's working together, it saves so much time. And Microsoft Teams really brings together the best of all of these for Teams specifically. Teams I like to describe as being what Office 365 would look like if it was built from the ground up in, say, the last year. If we didn't have SharePoint and Exchange Server from years past, or MOS or OCS Link / Skype, it would look a lot like Teams. One of my favorite ways to describe this is that the vice president who joined Microsoft to work on Teams, the last project he did, or one of the ones that he's best known for, is that he designed Outlook. And Outlook kind of became that hub where a lot of people spend a lot of their day. That's how we view Teams. The persistent chat, the shared files, the ability to pin Power BI dashboards and other applications into it. It makes it a really, really powerful collaboration space across the desktop application, the web app, mobile devices. And it is coming to the government cloud in the near future. It is available in enterprise for the past few months. And the simplicity that we're designing throughout all of these applications is evidenced by things that we've started to see or saw when we brought together Office 365. So I use this as an example. When we were running Exchange Server and SharePoint Server, you would do discovery across very different portals. The Exchange Admin Center, the SharePoint, you have your Records Center. With Office 365, we then centralized everything into the Admin Center, the Security and Compliance Center. We're doing the same with Microsoft 365. For example, we've actually aligned the release cadence of the Office applications and Windows updates. Twice a year, or more often should you choose, but twice a year we release Windows and Office, and you can push out one update to all the computers. And with things like Autopilot, you can actually take a brand new computer, say someone is flying hypothetically from Redmond to DC and they spill some water on their laptop, the thing gets fried. Well, with all of your data in the cloud, hopefully you've lost absolutely nothing. And then you get a new laptop, you log in with your domain credentials, and it automatically pushes down the build, and within just a couple of minutes, you have a fresh laptop with all of your information. This is the vision that we have, the direction we're trying to take it, where you can manage the device, the operating system, the applications, the data, the users, the identity, all from one seamless console. But security has to be built in throughout it. I mentioned that we've pivoted our thought process to be assume breach, assume that someone's in your network. We've also transitioned to using identity as the vector for security. Should this person have access to that information? And is it at the right time and for the right reason? This is really how we think about securing the information of our organization, is throughout. Also, we know not only will users click on every stupid link they get to win $1 million or whatever it says in the email, they also make mistakes. If I get an email that says do not forward, I will try not to forward it, but it has to do more than just say do not forward. We actually take away the forward button. We automatically classify documents and emails based on rules that can be written by IT and machine learning to recognize that if I write this is sensitive in an email and I forget to apply a policy, the system should do that for me. I should not be able to accidentally email a list of social security numbers to the wrong Tom in the address list. I shouldn't be able to send credit card numbers outside of my company if that's how the organization has set the policy, because that information by accident can do a lot of harm. And across all of these services, applications, we're also working to make the best experience possible with Surface, Surface Hub, Surface Laptops, Surface Book, Surface Studio. And part of what makes these really cool is the touch experience. With the Surface Hub, the big one here in the back, we make these up to, I think, like 84 inches. They're huge, they're beautiful. They're not just a digital whiteboard. They're actually a full Windows 10 computer. You can split it down the middle, and on one side have a Skype audio conference and video conference be communicating, and then have a whiteboard on one side taking notes. With the click of a button, you send those notes out to everyone who attended the meeting. Maybe save them into a OneNote notebook that everyone has shared access to. But we're working really hard to make sure that these devices are manageable and deliver the best experience possible. But we also recognize that there is a huge number of people that don't sit at a computer most of the day. They don't have access to a laptop, or if they do and have access to a computer, maybe it's a shared device. These folks are first responders, they're medics, medical staff, working retail, customer service, they're field workers, researchers, scientists, and largely they have been left behind, not left behind, but underserved by desktop computing. And so we're trying to change that. We're working really hard to make sure that the services, the applications, work for people who aren't necessarily always at their computer. We're working hard to make sure that people have access to the information they need, but recognize that not everyone has a work-provided device. And so maybe we need to be able to access it from our personal device, while that data can be protected and managed. So we do that by this global cloud running in the background. I want to recognize that while Microsoft is cloud first, we're super excited by our cloud, we do a lot of innovation there. Most organizations around the world have a lot of investment in on-premises infrastructure. We want to make sure that you can take advantage of those investments. That hardware doesn't just disappear overnight. So we enable a lot of hybrid scenarios. We'll hear about that more throughout the next few days, and in particular tomorrow morning during Dux's keynote. We'll talk a lot about what SharePoint Hybrid can bring, the way that you can leverage your existing investments, and also set a course so that you can achieve what you seek to over time. Now, part of what I think is so cool about the way we've architected the cloud is that it has also fundamentally shifted the way we develop software. I mentioned that it used to be 6 years from concept to release to implementation. When we release a new feature, like SharePoint hub sites or communication sites, the modern UI, you don't have to go procure new hardware. You don't even have to deploy patches. Rather, we're able to roll it out because we've architected the cloud in a multi-way active topology. And this isn't just taking backups and failing over to that occasionally. Rather, every one of these dots are regions in our global cloud. And we're missing a couple. I think since this slide was created, we announced South Africa, and hard to tell if France is on here or not. But each of these regions are made up of a set of data centers. And they run in a multi-way active topology so that we can take servers out of rotation, patch them, upgrade them, put them back in, and users never notice the difference except for having access to new features and capabilities. And that's really important because globally, there are no weekends, there is no after hours, there's no acceptable time for us to have maintenance windows for everyone in the world. And so we've designed the cloud to not have downtime, which is also important for our SLA. It's financially backed, blah, 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 blah. That's exciting and nice, but we care about availability and providing the services that need to be accessible. But that ability to release updates on an ongoing basis also fundamentally changes the mentality of our development teams, of our engineering teams. They're not planning for 3 years out. Well, they are. But they're also planning for the next release in 1 week. People often ask me, what version of Office 365 are you running? And the answer is, well, I guess like March 27th, 2018. It's today's build. We're running today's software. It means that we can patch vulnerabilities. We can update the software in real time. That's pretty cool. And we can also invest very significantly across all of this for compliance, which brings us to the government environments. So our global cloud was created in the early 2000s, but fast forward to maybe 2010, we had Office 365. And we recognized that having a global cloud where your data could be stored anywhere simply wasn't meeting the needs of US government, state, local, federal, tribal, defense. And so what we did is we carved out capacity in the global cloud, and we called it Government Community Cloud. GCC guarantees that your content at rest will be stored in the continental United States, and we ring-fenced that infrastructure with US citizens. We signed CJIS, or criminal justice information agreements, with a vast majority of the states in the country. We did audits, and we received ATOs for FedRAMP monitoring. And that remains our most popular US government offering. It's certified to hold federal data up to FedRAMP moderate, criminal justice information, federal tax information. If you nerd out over some of the stuff like I do, FedRAMP Moderate is transitive to the Department of Defense Security Requirements Guidelines at level 2. But then in roughly 2015, we started talking to some of the national security agencies, the Department of Defense, a bunch of defense contractors, and we recognized that we needed to do something, yet again, a little bit more unique for compliance purposes. Azure Government was built from the ground up in isolated data centers, separate network stamp, separate, I mentioned data centers, operations personnel, and on top of Azure Government, we built 2 Office 365 environments. They're mirror images of each other. The real difference is that the DoD environment is only for the Department of Defense, and GCC High, or Government Community Cloud High, is for federal agencies as well as government contractors, defense organizations, the DIB. And there, we're working on FedRAMP High. We expect to have that in the next few months. But we also meet the higher level compliance for the Department of Defense under the Security Requirements Guidelines so that we can guarantee that ITAR data is appropriately protected. We can guarantee that we meet DFARS, the Defense Federal Acquisition Regulation Supplement, and as I mentioned, we are working on FedRAMP High. The environment that's not on here, and I love saying this, but we're also working on Office 365 Secret and Azure Government Secret for classified workloads designed specifically for the intelligence community, the Department of Defense, and I always find it funny to talk about secret things, but that's just the name. It's classified, and so it's in the context of that we then often talk to organizations and say, so remind me why the cloud isn't secure enough for your business. The Air Force is here. and so that's really the way that we've designed these environments uniquely for the US government. And some of the other interesting conversations that we often have are, what's the difference between security and compliance? Well, the public cloud, the enterprise offerings, are absolutely secure. Top to bottom, as I mentioned, it's an existential consideration for us. But if you have a non-American citizen, someone entirely trustworthy, absolutely good person, but if the non-American comes in contact with export-controlled data, it's now been exported. That's the compliance piece. It's not security, it's slightly different. It's the regulations and the laws and what we're doing to empower everyone, including the United States government. I have one more slide and then I want to do a couple of demos, but one of the things that I really like to show and what I love about this slide is that when I joined Microsoft, I thought Office was Word, Excel, and PowerPoint. And at the time, maybe it kind of was. I didn't know about OneNote. I probably would have done better in college had I. But those are the applications that allow us to author documents, create content. But with Office 365, they're really powered by all of these services running in the background. And this isn't even all of them. The list goes on and on and on. You may notice that I don't have Flow or Power Apps or Stream. But when we look at what are these applications, what are the services, Office 365 is really broad. It's these authoring document applications. And I actually think Outlook belongs there. When I create emails, that has replaced a lot of the Word documents that I write, to be honest. But when you look at Yammer and the network effect that we're able to have, so that you can post questions when you don't know who the right answer is, or if you want to have a community forum within the organization, Yammer enables that. With sites and content, OneDrive for Business has replaced my desktop. I don't save anything to my computer except for, well, to be totally honest, this presentation, because if the Wi-Fi didn't work, I couldn't stand here stupidly the whole time. So I save everything in OneDrive. That is my storage. That's how you share documents. That's how you can collaborate on the documents that we're authoring. And SharePoint allows us to create beautiful intranets. Hub sites, communication sites. We'll hear a lot more about that throughout the next 3 days. And then Delve brings it together. Delve I think of as being enterprise search on steroids with a beautiful UI on top. It allows me to search when I don't know what I'm looking for. And I don't have to type anything in. The Microsoft Graph, spanning across the bottom, is this substrate that ties together the identities of individuals, of teams, of documents, who's working on what and who's working with whom. And then it allows us to expose information in the right place at the right time for contextual relevance. Delve is an example of that, where I go to Delve and I can see the documents that people around me are working on if I have explicit permissions to them. So either it's been shared with me, it's been emailed to me, or it's on a site where I have permissions. But Delve, I don't search for anything. It shows me what's popular and going on around me. Or I can search on an individual and I see their profile, pulled straight out of the directory, which is much more frequently updated than the profiles that we try to maintain. You know, I update LinkedIn when I'm applying for a new job and when I've just received a new job. In between, it's anyone's best guess what I actually do. But with the Delve profiles, in the directory, HR maintains where my office is, my phone number, my SIP address for instant messaging. You can look at a very high-level abstracted view of my calendar, and then also see the documents that I'm working on, if you have permissions to them. And you get a much better sense of who is this person. You can find expertise from around the organization, and it makes it really seamless to search across all of the sites where you have access. But then with chat and meetings and voice, we're also able to start to extend that collaboration experience to a much more quick-paced, real-time experience. If I'm in a document and I see that someone else is editing it and they're making changes that I really don't like, I can see if they're available. I open it up into an instant message in either Teams or Skype for Business, and Skype is transitioning into Teams over the coming months and years. I open up an instant message. Turns out that we actually need to talk about this, and we just, with a click of a button, have an audio conference going on. Now, when I'm working from home, I tend to be wearing like my bathrobe, and so I stick to audio conferencing. When I'm in the office, we'll do video conferencing. It's a little more professional when I'm in the office. But so we're able to kind of elevate these conversations based on the work that we're doing and the needs that we have. And then the analytics pieces are really, really cool. Power BI has democratized data science. Now, that's probably really insulting to a data scientist, but I used to describe Power BI as the most powerful BI solution, and that also is kind of stupid because that's the name. But Power BI allows us to take massive data sets, massive amounts of data that may be streaming in, and visualize it and make sense of it. I can take from, well, I'm not an admin in the Microsoft tenant, but I can look at the usage reports, so how many emails are being sent at an aggregate, how much storage is being used across SharePoint, how many documents are stored in OneDrive, and we can overlay that on top of the graph data. Which organizations are based where, and it's all anonymous, but in Power BI we can look at a map that shows a visual representation of where SharePoint is being used the most, by which divisions. We can look at email rates on a calendar. Tends to drop off over the weekends, depending on who you are, sometimes it spikes. But you can look at this visualization of the data and make sense of it at a quick glance, and really easily share these dashboards as well. I'm not going to really explain my analytics, I'm just going to show my analytics. But throughout all of these applications, and as I mentioned, there's a lot that's not on here. Sway, Staff Hub, Bookings, Flow, Stream, Power Apps. There is so much in Office 365 that if I do my job right, you will leave here with more questions than you came in with. But I want to take a moment and just kind of back out of PowerPoint and show you what a couple of these actually look like as I work through the integration that we have. Oh, that is my dog. I am also going to show you my real work, which is always risky, but I'm here in Teams, and I can, first of all, I have peer-to-peer chat. So I was teasing my teammate, Katie, because I was in a meeting with her, and she did not tell me that it was her birthday. So I pinged her and I said, Katie, I'm a little bit mad at you. Why would you not tell me that? And she's just a very polite person, so that's not something that would come to mind for her. But I have individual one-to-one chat. I then also have this team space where I mentioned you can create groups. So when I come in here into the Teams, it is so easy for me to create a new team, assuming the Wi-Fi cooperates, and it seems to be. SharePoint Fest DC, showing off Teams. I can create a team, and Microsoft has set it up in a way. Now, this is configurable, but any end user can create teams. And I'm going to add Tom Batchelor. So it's all pulling out of the directory, Jake Zaborski. And I'm able to very, very quickly and easily create a space where we can collaborate. Jake is my manager, Tom is my former teammate, and just like that, we now have a space where we can have a persistent chat. Hey Tom, how's Amsterdam? Tom is in Amsterdam right now. I can also see that I've tagged him in this post, and he's out of the office. And so it gives me that information right away. Maybe I want to add a GIF, or rather, I actually kind of like these stickers here. Have fun. So I can make it a fun conversation, but then I can also, it's still setting up. So what it'll do is it'll set up a SharePoint site in the background. We have this shared document library here, where we will be able to come in here. It's catching up. There we go. So it is spinning up this SharePoint site, and just like that, we now have a shared document repository where I can create a new Word document. I want to call it SharePoint Fest. And I'm able to very quickly have this document that Tom, Jake, and I all have shared access to. We can all work on it together. And so maybe we're working on the agenda for the meeting, and I want their help. We're able to work in line, have a persistent chat, and I'm able to ask them for assistance. Now, here's where it starts to get really cool. So that was in line. I could pop it open into Word, or do it in the full client, or even in a browser. But now I've left the Teams experience. But I want to reopen that Word document. I type Word. Oh, I never opened it in, I didn't actually open the document. So what I'll do is I'll open it into the Word client. Here's that document that I was just in. I'll open it in Word, and we'll get the same experience. Now I want to come into email. And so you can see I really do have 370,000 emails. It's a little embarrassing. But if I want to share a document that I've recently worked on with a friend, a teammate, I want to ask them to edit it, I click Attach File. Now, I see all of my recent documents, and so here's the PowerPoint presentation, or here's the document. It's popped up, it took a minute to propagate through. Just like that, the system recognizes that that's what I've been working on, and it knows that that is what I then want to share. That's the graph, the power of the graph. It knows that I'm Brian, I'm authenticated into Outlook, I was authenticated into Teams. I want to share a document, and I've recently been working on it. So what it's doing is it's sharing a link. And back to that document fragmentation experience, we used to say store it on a SharePoint site and send someone a link. Well, when I get a link in an email, it gets buried in that email thread. I never really know where it went. I don't know how to find it. I have to search on the person and that date and try to go in there. And that's not quite how people actually work. So we said, well, let's make it look like an attachment. Let's make it look and act like what people are used to, but because it's stored on our site, I can change the permissions from right within Outlook. And I prefer the black theme. That's just a personal preference. There's no difference here. This isn't a weird build. But I'm able to change the permissions right within Outlook, and I haven't actually had to go to the site and change the permissions of the site. The person that I send this to inherits the permissions to that document. And that makes sense because of the way that I work. If I'm sending a document to you in email, I inherently want you to have permissions to it. Now, what I don't necessarily want, though, is for you to be able to forward that document to 1,000 people and spread it all over the place. And so what happens is if I email this document to you, you get the permissions that I've set. If you forward it, that person has to come back and ask for permission. That's the right model to use so that the documents don't spread too far. But now if I really want to lock it down, I come here and I click Do Not Forward. I can set the classification. I mentioned that we can do auto classification as well. You can write policies in the Security and Compliance Center. So if I were to type in a credit card number or social security number, based on the number of digits and the dashes in the middle, it should automatically classify it. And these are the policies that MSIT has created. We have our directory split between full-time employees and contractors. So I can say it's confidential to only the recipients, to anyone at Microsoft, or only full-time employees. And here's my all-time favorite. Do not reply all. We have killed the email storm. That one blew my mind the first time I found it. But if I set these permissions, the do not forward, I am the owner, so I still have full permissions. So what I want to show is what it looks like when someone else sends this. So my friend Randy sent me an email. He thought it was confidential. He said, nice dog. He saw my background. He didn't want me to forward. But as I said, users sometimes pay attention to instructions. If you've ever worked at a help desk, you know that people call in and ask questions that are very well documented. People just don't read things. They ask, or they just do. So he says, don't forward nice dog, but I want my wife to see that Randy thinks we have a nice dog. But I can't forward it. That button is gone. I'm trying to click there where it says forward. It's gone. I can't print it. That button is also gone. The rights management capabilities span through all of these applications, and in fact, all the way through the operating system, to the point that if I tried to take a screenshot, I end up with a black box. The same thing is true on Skype sharing or Teams sharing. If I'm sharing my screen, that part shows up as just a black box. And I trust that there's probably people out here who have been watching a lot of Criminal Minds or something, and you're thinking, okay, I can take a picture. And that's true. You could. You could also go to a fax machine or a copier and put your computer in there. You could memorize stuff. That is a very malicious, deliberate act. You are very deliberately bypassing the controls that are in place. And these span through not just email. Yeah, this is cool for rights management on the email, but it applies to the documents as well. If I apply rights management to a document and I send it to someone outside of Microsoft and it's locked down to only full-time employees, they have to authenticate. And if they can't, it's just an encrypted blob of data that they will never be able to see. Now, if it's on a different computer, I log in with my corporate credentials. It works seamlessly. That's how we're protecting the information down to the data level. And just like I can't, I didn't even show this, I can't copy either. So just like I can't actually copy, that's true on mobile devices. If you're running the Outlook mobile app on iOS or Android, that experience carries through. I can't copy data out of my corporate Outlook, out of my corporate mailbox in Outlook, or a document that has been rights managed, and paste it into another one on my phone. We're getting rid of those accidents. We're no longer leaving it up to the user to trust them to do it right. And the last thing that I really wanted to show is when I go into, you're going to see my OneDrive for a moment here. When I go into My Analytics, that's the piece that I didn't describe because I wanted to show. My Analytics allows us to see how are we working when we have so many tools and so many ways to collaborate. So I come in here, here's my OneDrive. This is basically my desktop. This is where all my folders are. But because I have the recent documents capabilities, I don't actually almost ever navigate through folders looking for a file or a document. Rather, I've been working on it. Or I can probably do this now. If I type in Word, it shows my recent documents here. Clearly, I've been working on my resume at some point. The recent documents capabilities, when I'm attaching an email, allow me to stop chasing through my folders and rather focus on what I've been working on, whether it's in Word, in PowerPoint, in Excel. If I'm opening up the application, I tend to know I've been working on a Word document. I don't have to remember which SharePoint site that's saved on, or whether it's in someone else's OneDrive and they shared it with me. I know that it was a Word document and I worked on it in the last few days and it's going to be there. But, and this is, well, actually I don't really care. This should be fine. This is real data about how I do work. So I'm able to come into my analytics, and because my identity is in the cloud, because my mailbox is in the cloud, all of my meetings are in Exchange and Skype and using Teams, and I go to the SharePoint sites all the time, I can start to map out how do I do work and with whom do I work. Now, I also like to preface this with Microsoft is not an advertising company. We are not an e-commerce company. We do not want to monetize your data. We do not want to monetize any of the data that we have, nor do we want to be creepy. I'm often asked, can I use my analytics to see how many times people go to Facebook? Absolutely not. You can if you go search your network logs, and there's plenty of ways to do that, and there's other companies that make that type of software. But what my analytics does is it gives me a personal view, no one else at Microsoft can see this, of how I'm doing work. I can set goals for how many hours I intend to spend in meetings or emailing, if I work after hours. I always want to see that focus hours to be as high as possible. That's the time that I'm actually doing work. But I can look at, here are the top people that I work with, and are these appropriate? Well, Dan is a new teammate on my team whom I'm training, so yep, that's appropriate. Deanna's my manager, yep, that's appropriate. Jonathan actually probably shouldn't be there. He just happened to be visiting last week, and we spent a bunch of time emailing back and forth trying to find each other. Back to not making phone calls. That was a poorly done efficiency in terms of how I could have worked with him. But I also get insights into how my work is impacting other people. I read a lot of emails after hours, and I also send a lot of emails after hours. And I can see how many hours people are spending reading my emails after hours, and I might be setting a precedent that I actually don't find to be appropriate. At Microsoft, oh, here you go. This is another great example. Dan's a new guy on my team who I'm training, so it's absolutely appropriate that we have a ton of meetings together. However, if he was just a colleague that we happen to work on a lot of things together, my analytics is suggesting, why don't you divide and conquer? Dan go to half, Brian go to half, and then get together for an hour a week and bring each other up to speed. That might make sense. In this case, it doesn't. But the data provides insights that allow me to make decisions. I can see who's on basically my inner circle, who are the people I'm working with the most. Is it in the right place? Am I multitasking during meetings? The answer is always yes. But this starts to give me insights that allow me to make decisions about how I'm working and how my work impacts other people. A real example is that I found, based on the data, when I send an email to a group of individuals, they read it less frequently than if I send it to a smaller group or to an individual. Now that kind of seems like common sense. Hey everyone, take a look at this versus, hey Chris, I need you to respond please. Now, what was counterintuitive to me is that I spend more time sending emails now because I send more emails to individuals, but I get a higher read rate, a higher response rate, and they take action more frequently. And so by spending more time, I get a much higher ROI on that time invested, and that's just based on the data that I found. I can see my email activity, focus hours, and you can start to imagine what happens when you aggregate and anonymize this data across an organization. With the workplace analytics and the direction that we're starting to go with some of this, we can actually objectively measure a reorg. Did we reorg, and are people working with the right folks? Are they working in the right ways? Did that achieve what we wanted to, or was there some weird unintended consequence where we moved two teams around and now they're having tons and tons and tons of emails, but very few meetings, or vice versa? We're able to measure and use the data to see how are people working at an aggregate, again, working really hard to not be creepy, but we bring it all together so that we can make decisions based on what we're seeing across the organization. Now I want to jump down here for just a moment. Oh, whoops. Jump back into the slides just to wrap up with a couple of things in terms of what comes next. Because there is so much in Office 365, there is so much in Microsoft 365 and SharePoint. Where can you learn more? Well, one of the first things that we've done is we've designed an IT roadmap that allows organizations or individuals within an organization to start to map out where do you want to go and how do you get there. Microsoft 365 is a lot of things across almost the entire stack of what a CIO might care about. So you go to transform.microsoft.com/IT roadmap, and you can start to build out where do you want to go, what maturity model do you want. We didn't even talk about change management and how that starts to shift when you're in a cloud world where things are updating on an evergreen, ongoing basis. And then documentation. This is one that I'm actually really proud of the approach Microsoft is taking because, candidly, we have a tremendous amount of information and it is not easy enough to find. In fact, sometimes documentation comes second after we've shipped the product. In an on-premises world, that might be okay. We ship the product, you go build it in a lab, you play around with it. Chances are you're building better documentation than what we have. You know the experience. You call support, you run into one of those undocumented features. We're shifting our development model so that documentation is built into it as we go. Part of the agile model, and as we're evolving to build the documentation, docs.microsoft.com is our North Star. TechNet has a tremendous amount of content. MSDN has a massive amount of information. We're bringing this all to docs.microsoft.com to build it out as the single source of information. But maybe more importantly, the tech community is where Microsoft folks, Microsoft MVPs, partners, customers, community members all come together to share information, to ask questions. I believe we're up to, I think it's something like 200,000 visitors per either week or month. This is a relatively new community space, and so we're really proud of the growth and the vibrancy of what's going on there. The Microsoft product group folks often make announcements there first because we want to share them with the community, get feedback, and then we'll go do a press release or whatever when we have a chance. But the community is really where we go to work with individuals. If you'll indulge me for a moment, when David mentioned that there's a photo contest, I noticed that there's a group photo category. If I may, I would like to cheat a little bit and take a group photo of everyone all at once. On 3, I love SharePoint Fest. 1, 2, 3. I love SharePoint Fest. Awesome. Thank you very much. I appreciate your time. I hope you enjoy the rest of SharePoint Fest and all of the great sessions we have throughout the next 2 days.